Unspoiled Network podcast.
I was hoping that we were going to get something about Maeve's story and maybe some retribution or some justice. No. We get another shot to the gut for Maeve, where her mother dies. This was a really sad episode, y'all. It really was. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode. Thank you so much. I am really enjoying this season a lot. You know, I just was talking with Owen about how great it is. He's finally caught up with me. And he was very annoyed to catch up because that meant that he could no longer watch to his heart's content. He wanted to be able to just continue on, which I sympathize with. And he said that, like, there was some thread on, I think, Twitter, and they were talking about best Netflix, like, written shows. And he chimed in and was just like, I think that Sex Education is a show that people are sleeping on, and it's frankly one of the best written shows they have ever released. And we were talking about how I've been commissioned to watch this season, and a big part of me has been sort of like, how can they keep this up? Like, every season has been so fucking solid. And they're just doing it. They're just doing it again. This is just another really solid season. I may take that back at some point, but as of right now, everything is just so consistent. And that's like the number one thing. People are acting like themselves. I don't see any characters who are behaving in a way that feels weird, that feels unnecessarily like goofy to make a plot point happen that wouldn't happen. There's nothing feeling super contrived. Like, even one could argue the fact that, and forgive me, I'm forgetting her name, but Jean's sister has, like, somehow met the person who I believe is the father of Jean's child. Even that you could see as being really contrived if this show did this all the time. But because they just don't really do that type of thing, and because this is supposed to be like a fairly small community, I'm totally willing to buy it and just let it go and not feel a way about it at all. So, all right, let's start things off, because this begins with the worst date in the world. Now, you guys, this woman, I think her name is Gloria. She is a man-eater. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Okay? I just want to be clear. A woman can definitely, like, fuck all she wants. It's fine. But the way that she handles this, I found really distasteful. So she comes home with him, and she makes it very clear she just wants to have sex. But she doesn't, like, ask if it's okay. She doesn't clear anything with him. She just grabs him and begins to, like, kiss him and unbuckle his pants. He eventually starts to unbuckle his pants for her, so it feels like he's going along, but I just didn't like this initiation. And she climbs on top of him with, like, no ceremony whatsoever, and is just trying to stick it in immediately. Now, I am blown away, kids. I need a little more foreplay than that. I feel like the only time that I have ever been able to go immediately was because there was a lot of, like, teasing and build up in, like, the date beforehand. And the way that he is acting, Michael, it does not tell me at all that he has been flirting in a way that would be a turn on. He seems totally unaware. Like, he didn't know that this was a date in the first place. And then when she says, why don't we have our wine after? He says, after what? So, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just feels like how is it possible that she is already ready to go? I'm not saying that it is impossible, but for me, it would just never be this easy. And she jumps on him. She just starts humping him. And then, understandably, in my opinion, he loses his erection. Now, we find out later that there's like a different, more emotional component to all this. But in the moment, I was willing to just believe that he had lost his erection because she just went so hard, so fast, that he was genuinely startled and was like, wait, what do I do? And, you know, like, it felt not sexy to me. It felt like she was just tearing open a bag of chips and pouring them down her throat, basically. And when she keeps trying to, like, make it happen, she's just saying, come on, come on. And then, eventually, she stops and is like, this is just not going to happen, is it? And when he offers to cuddle, she straight up just gets off him and says, thank you for dinner, Michael, but I need a proper man in the bedroom. Ouch. Like, that is just a really shitty thing to say. And the fact that he comes to her for a second date, she didn't deserve it. She didn't deserve a second chance. This was her being shitty. And I'm not surprised that he kind of feels the need to, like, prove himself to her. But, it makes me sad that he, I don't want to say falls for it. That's not really the what I mean to say here. But, like, it makes me sad that the impulse is there for somebody who just doesn't really seem like that great a person, to be honest, you know? And then she gets on the phone and calls somebody up within earshot to fuck as soon as she gets out of there. And it was just so incredibly rude. Like, I, again, have no problem with her being like, no, I really want to fuck tonight. I'm sorry. I gotta get it. And so I'm going to call somebody. Go ahead and do that. You don't call them while you're literally standing in the room with him still and make him feel fucking pathetic. Like, what a quick way to make a dude shrivel up too, you know? It's a sort of thing with, like, a guy completely, like, jumping on a girl and then being like, wow, you didn't even get wet. This is really bad sex. Well, what do you think? You didn't do anything. You didn't attempt foreplay of any kind. You didn't even, like, assess whether that he was interested. You know, like, this scene just made me so mad. And it made me angry that he gives her another shot and it doesn't work. Even though he takes Viagra, it still doesn't do the job. And Owen was like, what's going on? Didn't he take Viagra? And I was like, yeah, I think maybe it's just because she isn't his wife and he loves his wife. And it turns out, indeed, that is what it is. She isn't somebody that he has an emotional connection to. And his wife turns up. And you guys, I really would have thought I'd hate this, but I'm kind of on board. The thing that I'm worried about is that Adam has only just started to get used to the idea of his dad attempting to be a better person. That's my main concern here, is like, he isn't really prepared, I don't think, for the two of them to give it another try. And I am not sure whether Michael has come enough of a ways for this sort of thing to, like, be officially attempted. I'm not totally against it, but I just feel sort of hesitant about it. Just a little bit concerned, that's all. So anyway, that's the intro. She gets up and leaves, and then we jump over to Maeve, who is arriving on the bus from the airport, and she's getting picked up by Joanna. Is that her name? The woman who's doing the fostering. And Joanna has Maeve stay with her, and I really love the fact that Maeve is beginning to have, like, a better relationship with her, that there is a level of trust there. They walk with their arms around each other for a little while, and it's just nice. Like, Maeve just deserves more support, and the fact that she is opening up enough to let this be makes me really, really happy. So there is a moment where Amy is getting dressed in the morning, and I think she drops a pair of jeans and looks at them and puts them away. I believe those are the jeans she was wearing when she was assaulted, because she looks at the pocket and that's like sort of where the cum was. So I'm assuming that's what is going on there. It took me a second to really get what was happening, because she looks super uncomfortable. And then she just puts them away and continues getting ready for school. You guys, she is wearing these like satin pink striped pajamas that I almost own like an exact pair of. I love them so much. Me and Amy, like, we are not similar people at all. Not really, but like, I just feel such a kinship with her. I love her character so much. She's just really a favorite. I feel like I wish more girl characters got to be this weird. I was talking about her in another episode, and I feel like I started to get to a point and I never really got there. But what I had been going to say was that usually characters who say weird offbeat shit like Amy, what they're usually used for in comedies is as somebody who's just a complete non sequitur that you just drop in when you need somebody to like really shake up the vibe of a room in a way that feels almost like they weren't even part of the conversation otherwise, and they have tuned in for a brief moment and tuned out again. Or when they are going to be like borderline creepy or a little disturbing, in terms of like Creed from The Office, for example, or I can't remember his character's name, but Jason Mendoza's character in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where he just like throws out some really like awful experience that he's had as if it's totally funny or normal. That's like usually the kind of thing that a character with this non sequitur energy is used for. And it's really nice that for her, it's just harmless stuff, and it's just her being open in a way that's like, genuinely, I don't understand why people react so weirdly to me. Like, what's the big deal? I'm just explaining, you know? I really, really love her. Then we see Jackson getting ready, and he is having a bit of a freak out about the lump. And he goes to see a doctor later on in the episode who asks about whether his like parents have any history of cancer or anything like that. And Jackson doesn't know who his father is. And it's unclear if his mothers know and haven't told him, if they have lied about not knowing, or if there's like, you know what I mean? Like if there's something else going on there. It just feels in a way like he isn't being given all the information, and I don't know if he's actually asked for it, or if he feels like asking is some kind of violation somehow. I can't tell what his feelings on it are. But anyway, the doctor eventually tells him, we're going to send you in for a scan just to be safe. And it's really clear, like, Jackson had expected him to just be like, oh, no, you're fine. It's nothing to worry about. And when he doesn't react that way, Jackson doesn't know what to do. Like, he's truly a bit flipped out. And I felt for him so much, because he's trying to be cool, and it's sort of like, for who? Why? I know that it's probably just for himself. It's probably for his own sake that he's just kind of trying to like not freak out, don't overthink things. He has anxiety. He's always suffered with that. So that's likely what's going on. But a part of me was like, dude, you're worried you may have cancer. Like, you get to freak out a little bit. You do. I'm not saying you just sit there and just feel sorry for yourself. Like, and completely go down a rabbit hole. Nobody wants that either. But I feel like it's understandable if you do have a bit of a moment, and his mother stops him on the way out because she's like, hey, I know you're like not okay. And he won't admit it. He's just like, no, I'm fine. You're not fine. And it's okay that you're not fine, you know? And I don't think, like, we don't get an answer by the end of this episode to what's going on with him. So I'm really unsure whether or not it's going to turn out that he's okay. Is he just going to be like the person dealing with a health crisis this season? Is that going to be his role? I don't know. I don't really have a problem with that in like a general sense, because I think it's a good thing to show what that looks like and the things that happen when you go through something like this, because it demystifies some of that. But, you know, I just don't want a bad thing to happen to Jackson. I like him. So then we go to Jean, and, her sister's name is Joanna. So I can't remember then the name of the woman that, Maeve's with. I thought her name was Joanna, but I was wrong. But, anyway, she tells Jean that there's a guy that she met at the bank, and Jean is like, maybe just don't do the thing you always do and jump right into another relationship. And, you know, understandably, Joanna is like, well, you're one to talk. And like, Jean hasn't jumped from relationship to relationship. She has mostly been just fucking without relationships. But I do kind of understand what she means. And she says, it's just a date. I don't need you mothering me right now. And Jean says, well, can't you take Joy with you? The show hasn't been going very well, and I'm going to a meeting today, and I am quite worried that they are going to fire me. I really shouldn't have taken the job in the first place. And she kind of has a moment here where she looks like she's going to cry. And Joanne says, it's fine, I can rearrange my date. But she doesn't. I just want to point this out. She says, it's fine, I can rearrange it. What she does is she winds up bringing Joy with her on the date. Now, I'm not saying this is a terrible thing. He reacts quite well. He's very sweet. I really like him, actually, despite the mommy issues that it seems were brought up in like the first season that never were addressed. I just feel like, I don't know. I guess Jean said, can't you bring Joy with you? So what she's doing was actually what Jean asked her to do to begin with. So it's probably fine. But, you know, I just sort of was like, And this is when Joanna gets up and she says, I'm going to fart on your head. And she does. She literally stands up and farts on Jean's head. And then Otis comes in. And he tells his mom that he's going to miss the day because Maeve's mom is in the hospital and she really needs me. She says, have fun. And I was like, that's not, I don't feel like you want to say that, but okay. And then we go to Adam, who is turning up at his job, his internship. His mother tries to be casual about whether or not his dad went on the date, and he just does like, well, why do you care? Oh, no, nothing. I'm just happy that he's moving on. That's all. She sees the girl who like is running this place, and it's the owner's daughter, I guess, and mentions how pretty she is. And he says, I didn't notice. And I'll be honest, you guys, I didn't either, because I have had so much anxiety about him keeping this job that she just didn't register with me at all. And she is really pretty. It's just like, you know, when he says, I didn't notice, I kind of felt like maybe he's not lying. And there's a sense when she walks past him that it's finally like registering with him that she is quite pretty, and he's sort of annoyed for that to have been pointed out, because now it's like distracting, you know? But later on in the episode, we get a really lovely moment where he is taught to ride, and it's really sweet. I did horseback riding when I was very, very young. I was probably like 11. my grandmother worked for the music department at Yale, and her connection there got me in for a discounted rate to their stables that they had like off campus. And it was so much fun. I really, really loved it. But eventually she left her job and we weren't able to afford it anymore. And I think about it a lot because it was just one of those like experiences that I didn't realize at the time how unique it was. Like, you know, it was just something that my mother was able to arrange for me and I was really happy with. And it wasn't until I got a little older and told people that I had taken horseback riding lessons and they were like, really? That I started to be like, oh, this is kind of not a thing most people get to do. And there is definitely a part of me, like to this day, that I wish so much I could take these sorts of lessons again. Like at this point, one, I'm too heavy. I wouldn't be allowed to sit on a horse at this weight. Like, unless it was like, you know, the kind of fucking cart horses that they have in Budweiser commercials, maybe. And two, unbelievably expensive. And, you know, the kind of thing that's like, what are you going to be using this skill for? More than likely, it's just for these lessons. And then I'm not buying a horse or anything. So it feels so impractical, but a big part of me does miss it. And, it's really just sweet to see her like having patience with him, not immediately firing him because he like lied about what he was capable of, even though if she had fired him, I couldn't have blamed her. And he is willing to learn and willing to try. And that's really the main thing. Is it could be a sort of situation where he is just so afraid that there's just no way he gives it a try. And I was proud of him that he remains open and it works out. It was just really nice. Everything has gone so poorly for Adam. I want a success for him. And speaking of other successes, he has a chat with his father. This was fucking hysterical, you guys. He has a chat with his father and his dad just brings up how he couldn't keep it up. And it's really amazing that he's like, well, I thought we were sharing things now. I'm like, look, I'm not mad at you for this. I'm more astonished. That's really like, just because you have decided, okay, we're sharing things now. Most people aren't just able to start doing that. And being able to like share with your son that you had trouble getting it up while you were trying to fuck another woman on a date, that is a level of comfort that I just didn't see Michael reaching anytime soon. And I'm almost like impressed. Like, I feel like that's a good sign, if anything. You know what I mean? I'm just sort of going, you know, I know it wasn't appropriate. I don't blame Adam for recoiling in horror. But also, if he has reached this place, that's sort of great. That means he is really opening up in a way that was like nearly impossible for him not long ago. So good for him, dude, you know? And Adam is able to tell him that I think you have performance anxiety because, reminder, Adam had this experience in the first season. And he, you know, got help. He was the first person to go talk to Otis and get help about it. And also he took to Viagra because he was a crazy person who didn't believe the instructions, I guess. And that shit did not go the way that he wanted. So he was able to instruct him on that too, even though his father wants to know how he knows that and he has no intention of telling him. I love the fact that he is just able to be like, yeah, just take my word for it. Just don't do it. So the relationship between the two of them, it is like developing, and it makes me a little less like worried about his mother going and hooking up with Michael again. I still am worried, but it's not, I don't feel about it the way that I might have if he were having less success with Adam. So I feel like that's pretty much everything with Michael up until, or everything with Adam. The one thing that happens with Michael we'll get to later because that's a whole other situation with Jean. But I'm just going to talk about the Joanna thing. So first of all, she opens this box when we go to this scene with her and she's watching Joy. She's taking this really bizarre looking like ceramic mask out of a box, and it has this like red light that she pulls onto her face. And evidently it's supposed to like stimulate collagen production and make her look younger. Now, she says when she answers the door and Eric is there, she explains it was very, very expensive. She doesn't have any money. How did she buy this? You know, if it weren't for the fact that she says it was expensive, I would think maybe she stole it somehow. Because frankly, she just doesn't seem like the type that would at all mind stealing. Like, at all. But I don't think that's what's happening. And I genuinely can't imagine if she wasn't able to get a loan, if she wasn't able to get a credit card. When she says, I don't have any credit, maybe she was just lying. Maybe she does, and it's piss poor. And she was hoping that maybe without credit, they would just give it to her somehow. But yeah, this is not a great sign. And like, I am somebody who struggles with wanting to overspend a lot. I love things. I love things that are pretty. I get interested in different creative pursuits that, of course, require supplies and whatnot. And I have been managing it, but I understand how people fall into this sort of like pattern because it can make you feel better temporarily and really make you feel like, especially if you're getting something towards a goal, that you're like somehow getting your life under control. It gives you a real illusion of forward progress when in fact, all you're doing is procrastinating really. There's a lot of action that can be taken without certain tools, but I am the kind of person that will fool myself into thinking I need those tools. I absolutely have to have them before I can do anything. And I don't, but you know, like, so I have sympathy for people who are making these sorts of choices in a hypothetical sense. But I also have to wonder how long she thinks she can hide this when she's staying with Jean. And Jean has to know she's got very little money. I guess there's like a moment where Jean like sort of intercepts her coming out of the bank in the previous episode. And she just says like, oh, the bank shut off my card. So Jean thinks that she has access to money somehow. But if this goes on, it's just going to come out. And what's going to happen? You know, like, is this the reason that she wound up getting dumped too? Because this can definitely be a thing. I have, in more than one relationship, I have discovered that partners of mine were overspending behind my back and they were using credit to a point that was really dangerous. And they just lied. And that is definitely a reason to terminate a relationship. If you feel like you can't trust somebody, like that sort of thing, especially if your names are tied together, that can come back to bite you if they don't take care of it. But I just don't know what's happening with her. And she goes on this date later with, I can't remember his name. I feel like it was like Drew or something, but it is actually adorable. Like the two of them clearly get along well and he seems to really, really like her. And there's a moment when he asks her a question about like kids and she says something about how like, I'm just worried about passing on like my fucked up qualities to them. And then she says like, that was probably the wrong answer. And he says, no, it wasn't. It really, really wasn't. And the way he says it and smiles, it's clear that he is like into her, you know? And I really enjoy him. I'm kind of glad he's back, you know, the fact that he was like in the first season and disappeared. There was no reason to expect him to come back again. And I say first season, but he must have been in the second season as well, because that was when Jean got knocked up, right? So anyway, he asks, like, you know, about whether she wants to have kids. And Joanna is surprised that he has gotten right to the point. And he's like, look, I've gone on a lot of first dates, and many women are just interested in banging. And I'm trying to just be honest about what I'm looking for so that I don't waste people's time. And she says, I want to settle down too, but I can't seem to make anything long-term stick. It's just like the wrong person or the wrong time. And there's always that risk of passing down all your dysfunctional shit to an infant. And yeah, her frankness, like, I can see why he likes her, but I am just so worried because the two of them are hitting it off so much. When he finds out who this baby is, I don't know what he's going to fucking do. I don't know what she's going to do. You know, like, oh my God. I can't help but wonder too, like, is there a possibility that she would adopt the child away from Jean? I feel like Jean's way too much of a control freak. Like, I don't think she'd be able to do that. But Jean is not handling having Joy. You know, Jean is really fucking drowning, man. It's bad. So, you know, and she doesn't want to admit that she needs help. Like, she gets kind of shitty with Otis about it. And I feel like she thinks that she's putting up a good front of being, like, handling everything. And I'm like, girl, who do you think you're fucking fooling? Nobody thinks you're okay. Not a soul. Everybody just looks at you and can see that you're, like, completely overwhelmed. So that's what's going on there. Eric, by the way, had turned up and was upset because, of course, Otis has, like, forgotten to tell him that Maeve is back and that he's not going to be going to school with him. So Eric came all the way here to pick Otis up, and Otis isn't even fucking here. And Eric, understandably, is just like, wow, okay. Again, when she shows up, the entire rest of the world just disappears, which is what Ruby says to Eric later. And that seems to hit a chord with him. I'm kind of feeling like once he finds out Maeve's mother died, perhaps if he, like, starts to kind of jump down Otis's throat before Otis explains, he might feel like kind of a dickhead. But I can't help but think, like, Otis felt bad about getting uninvited to the queer night, but then he just dropped Eric, without thinking. And, you know, this is a big deal. Maeve is going through some shit, sure, but completely forgetting that you were going to see your friend, that there's a routine that you do in the morning, that's like a particular kind of thoughtless. And I can't help but think maybe Eric's finding some new friends is good for him so that he's not just, like, wondering what's going on with Otis all the time, you know? Ashleigh's here. Hi, Ashleigh Ann. I overslept my alarm. Oh, right, because the time difference. Well, you're here. Delighted to have you. So, speaking of people who have been, like, forgotten, Ruby is here managing Otis's appointments that were left hanging. He had, like, a full slot, and he has not told her a thing about where he is, what's going on, nothing. And, you know, she's the one that's really trying to, like, help him win this election. And it means a lot to her personally. And she shared something that was really vulnerable with him about her motivations in all of this. So for him to just completely fucking ghost her the next day, again, really shitty. Like, Otis can just be so self-absorbed sometimes. And she's, like, attempting to mitigate the damage here. And y'all, I had tried to give the benefit of the doubt that she didn't actually remember Ruby. I was really attempting to be like, maybe she doesn't. Maybe it's supposed to be that what's going on here is Ruby obsessed about her bully and never forgot her face. But Ruby was such a non-entity to O that it completely isn't clicking for her. And Ruby can't imagine that because it was such a pivotal moment for her life that, you know, the fact that somebody else could just forget it is unthinkable to her. But there's a moment later when they are talking because, like, there's an announcement about the debate that's happening. Come and hear Otis and O make the case for why they deserve to vote. We'll have free tote bags for anyone who comes along. And Ruby says, what's this about a debate? And O, smirking very smugly, says, I'm so sorry. Who are you again? And Ruby says, will you please stop pretending that you don't know who I am? And when she says that, O's face was difficult to read. It seemed like she glanced over at the other people. And then she asked Ruby, why don't we talk alone? So I think she definitely does remember. And she knew Ruby could be one step away from outing the shitty fucking thing she did to all of these clients, and then it would spread immediately. And so she was just like, come inside, come inside. And I really want to know, what your plan is here. I think O thinks, rightly, as far as we know, that Ruby is so unwilling to share her own humiliation that O is ultimately safe from her like shitty behavior being outed. I am so like grossed out at my own desire for Ruby to just take the bullet and tell everybody. Like, I know that Ruby is somebody who protects herself. I get what it is that has like gotten her this far. But she is now in a school where Otis showed his dick on multiple slides on a screen and nobody makes fun of him. They just feel bad for him. And then it got him a client or two, you know? Nobody's like judging him. And all I can think is that if Ruby manages to get over the shame that she feels and really just see it as shame that O should feel, everybody will turn on O and be so supportive of Ruby in a way that she has been looking for. Ruby wants friends. She's wanting to connect and doesn't understand why it's not working. And it's because she isn't herself. She isn't genuine and she isn't letting people in, and they can sense that. And to this point, that has worked for her, you know, in a sense. She's a bitch, but she isn't getting mocked anymore. So, you know, this is the kind of community that she's in now, where being genuine and authentically yourself is valued and something that people can tell whether or not you are actually participating in that. And Ruby really is seeing what happened to her through the lens of the shitty, petty, childish attitudes of her old school. And I don't think that's what she's going to receive here. So, and I won't lie and say that my motivations in wanting her to like out O aren't selfish and just wanting to see O taken down a peg. But I also do want to see her make friends because I actually like Ruby. I really do. She's a difficult character, but I understand her. And I feel like this is the next piece, like the next step for her growth, is learning that maybe there are people you can be really vulnerable around and it's not going to blow up in your fucking face. You know, she had a friend was it last season or the season before, who like shared a pussy shot that she sent somebody with the entire school. I mean, no wonder she's fucking paranoid after everything that she had already gone through as a little kid. A very close friend had done this. I mean, yeah, of course you would just feel like, who can be trusted? Not a soul, you know? But I really like the fact that it seems Otis people remember who he is, and he was greeted by Roman as like weird pubes guy, but it doesn't ever really feel mean-spirited. It's just sort of like, oh, you're that guy, you know? So this is me hoping, because O's whole deal, it's so tough. I don't think O is bad at this like therapy thing at all. But O isn't vulnerable herself. And the fact that she's lying to Ruby's face about remembering who she is leads me to believe there is a lot of other shit that she's probably hiding. The mere fact that she's going by O and not Sarah, what are you hiding from? There's something that was attached to your name that you're trying to drop. And I can't help if it's just like, I'm going to start putting myself out there as a sex therapist so that I can focus on other people's issues and not my own. Or, God forbid, I can use what has been told to me in confidence against people at a later point. I don't think that's what she's up to. I haven't seen evidence of that, but considering the way that she like behaved with Ruby, who knows? You know, who knows what she's ultimately after here. She's giving good advice, and she seems to have like a good sense of things, and she's on the radio later on as a guest with Jean, which is wild. Like, she's a college student. I'm not sure exactly how old they're meant to be, but the fact that she got tempted to be a guest is truly insane. And she does a really good job, you know? She manages to keep Jean from like just monologuing. It's rough, you guys, at first. Like, the whole situation with Jean and her being so in her head. She isn't engaging. She is just, again, she needs to accept help, and she doesn't want to. She's so resistant to it, even at work. But the show was 1,000 times better with somebody guesting, you know? But she is a control freak. And I get it. I really do. I mean, samesies. But girl, you're not handling shit. And you know that. So why are you so hell-bent on, like, pretending that you are? What do you think you're doing? You're not fooling anyone, and you don't think you're handling it. You just confessed that you thought you were going to be fired. This was best case scenario. Ugh, God. So anyway, that's when, well, actually, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because I jumped past the conversation that Ruby and O have. They have a sort of like back and forth where O is assessing Ruby, and they kind of like are walking around each other, and they do this thing where O starts to call out Ruby and walk towards her, and Ruby backs up. And what she's calling out is the fact that Ruby is still in love with Otis, and that she is just hoping that eventually Otis is going to sit up and notice her. And Ruby is clearly unnerved by the fact that she can tell all of this. And she decides to go on the offensive. And she comes at her, finally, steps forward, and that causes O to step back. Start preparing yourself to lose. When we were 10, you decided to make my life a living hell, and I promise you, I plan on doing the same thing to you. Was that a threat? No, it's a promise, Sarah. And her face falls when she calls her Sarah. Really falls in a way that, again, I'm like, something about just that name feels like triggering, you know? Now, I've got a debate to prepare for. And she walks away, and I can't help but wonder, I really, like, O says after her, my name is O now, and looks almost like she's going to cry, and I'm like, something about that. But yeah, the whole thing was that, like, O set up this fucking debate, and she claims, I would have told Otis if it went through, and Ruby's like, sure you would have. Obviously. She had been planning to try and catch him unprepared and off guard. A really low move. I am extremely curious if Otis is going to tell his mother who that was. Because I don't know what her reaction would be. She clearly kind of liked O. And I don't like the way that Jean reacts to things sometimes. Like, she might just be like, well, she seems like she's quite good at the job, you know? And just shit all over. I don't know if Otis would tell Jean about what happened to Ruby, because Jean doesn't know how to keep a secret. She's very bad with boundaries. So if he tells Jean, everybody's going to find out. I really hope he doesn't. I would understand the urge, but I hope he doesn't. But anyway, okay, so now I'm just going to mention, like, the phone call from Michael to the what do you call it? The radio show. And his wife happens to also be listening. So she kind of recognizes his voice right away. And then as he continues to explain, she realizes, like, for sure that this is him. And I couldn't tell if Jean also knew or not. I think she may have recognized his voice. But he admits, like, I miss my wife. You know, that's who I was thinking about. And it's really something because his wife said, I think it had been like 6 years, something like that, since they had had sex. So if he's thinking of his wife in, like, a sexual context, that's certainly an improvement about how things had been, where she, like, wore a silk nightie and came downstairs and he told her to go change because we're not teenagers anymore. And so, yeah, she goes over to his house or his apartment, and, like, they have hooked up once before, but he took it as a signal that they were getting back together, which was not what she intended. But when she goes over to his place that night, she says, I miss you too. And I really hope, like, she's not fucking around, because he's going to get his hopes really up. And not that that's the only thing that's getting up. Am I right? Hey. And I am just kind of, like, concerned that she's doing something impulsive without considering emotionally what the impact is going to be on him. We'll see. Maybe it's something to worry about. But I felt for him so much, and I like the fact that he needs this emotional connection because, again, that's a sort of vulnerability we haven't seen from him before. And I just kind of, like, want them to work it out. I do. So that's what's up with them. Now I'm going to spend these last 10 minutes talking about Maeve. So first we have a bit of progress with Maeve. Otis shows up to go with her to the hospital with Amy. Amy's the one picking her up. And Maeve has not gotten a chance to shower or anything. She's just, like, rolled in on the bus, came to the house, dumped her stuff, and Amy came to pick her up immediately. And she kind of reacts like, what are you doing here, when she sees Otis? But she explains quickly she had hoped to look a little bit better by the time he saw her. He offers to go, and he really doesn't seem to take offense at it. He's genuinely trying to do whatever is making her most comfortable. And she, like, manages to put aside that discomfort and admit she wants him there, and puts her arms around him, and it's really, really sweet. Amy then throws a deodorant at her, which is hilarious. So then they go to the hospital, and Maeve spots her brother and goes inside, and Otis and Amy wait in the parking lot. I'm just going to say, these two friends deserve a medal, because it is hours that they are in this parking lot, and they just decide to wait the whole time. And you see the sun go down. Like, it's a long time. Amy is attempting to take Otis's photograph, and she's just like, it's really fun because he keeps trying to pose and stuff, and or he's trying to pose, and she keeps trying to tell him not to, and he can't seem to help it. And this is when Ruby texts him about, like, the debate thing. I wanted him to text her back to, like, you know, anything. He doesn't respond. He reads her text, but he doesn't reply. So they talk a little bit about Isaac, and she's very defensive. And it turns out, because I was not really sure why, it turns out that because Maeve and Isaac were a thing, she kind of feels like she's maybe infringing a little bit. Honestly, they were a thing for so briefly that it didn't even occur to me that would be an issue. And I really don't think it will be an issue. But once she mentioned it, I was like, oh, okay. No, yeah, like, that's probably smart. It just, they were, you know, it was like they barely connected, and he told Maeve the truth about Otis, and that kind of blew everything up. And then I think after that, she sort of eventually forgives him and decides that she's going to give it a shot, and they make out a little bit, but Otis has by that point found out that Isaac deleted it and is making a play for her again. And eventually Isaac is just like, look, Maeve, if it's such a struggle for you to decide between the two of us, I don't want to be with you. Like, it shouldn't be this, like, you know, difficult decision. You should just want to be with me. And I agree with him and admire that. So like I said, it just felt like things never really quite even got going. And therefore, it was a non-issue in my head. But I like the fact that it is something that Amy is considering, because of course it is. She's a good friend, you know, and she's very sensitive. Even if she says the wrong thing sometimes and fucks up, she's really sensitive. It's one, like, as soon as she has heard that she has fucked up, she immediately tries to make it right and apologize and whatever, you know. She's very conscientious in that way. So, I am hoping Otis gives her the advice that, yeah, you really should tell her. And I'm hoping that she finds a good time to have this conversation. But obviously with the death of Maeve's mom, it doesn't feel like that conversation is going to be coming up anytime soon. Like, it doesn't feel like a good time for it. So let's see. I'm trying to make sure I'm covering everything. I'm jumping around in the show here a little bit. Oh, yeah. Okay. So here's this moment. I'm back with Ruby. I said I was going to talk only about Maeve, but I forgot about this scene with Ruby. She is going over to the It crew with Abby and Roman, and oh my God, I can't believe that she's like my fave, and I always forget her name. Alicia? I feel like there was a Isha in there somewhere. Keisha? I don't remember. But she says, can I ask a few questions? And I love, they say, we're in the middle of a meeting. She says, it'll just take a sec. And she sits down and asks, do you feel like O has ever, like, treated you badly? And they all say, well, it's not they all. Abby says, she's helped me through a lot of problems. And then says, we think she's great. And she says it when she's like gesturing and sort of moving her head really quickly. And her friend, the girl whose name I can't remember, who is the cutest, says, sorry, I didn't catch what you said. And she says, don't worry, babe, I'll tell you later. Which, there's a real sense there of, Aisha, thank you, Ashleigh. Jesus Christ, I knew there was Aisha. There's a real sense there of, one, being like, I'll tell you later is just so dismissive. You're not including her in the conversation. And it's just sort of a thing that like, maybe Abby is like trying to keep her out of the conversation. It's a toss up. Is it just dismissive and shitty and she's being thoughtless? Or is she actually aware that maybe Aisha has been mistreated by O and she doesn't want to let her get a chance to say anything about it? I don't know. But she like looks over at her partner, the one with the bleached hair, in a way that is just like, can you believe that just happened? And her partner like breaks eye contact with her in a way that feels to me ashamed. Like she feels as if she should have spoken up and didn't. And Aisha is sort of like, I don't know if she's blaming her or if the two of them already have felt a way about the way that Abby treats Aisha, and this is them just kind of clocking it again and being like, oh, there she goes again. You know, I don't know. But finally, there is a point when Abby says, because Ruby is continuing to push it, do you feel O's behavior has ever been not inclusive or mean? And Abby says, look, this is feeling quite bitchy now. But she says it over Aisha's partner, who starts to say, last, and doesn't give them a chance to talk. And then Aisha looks at her and just shakes her head really briefly, like, don't push it. And I am dying. Clearly something happened. And I don't know what the fuck. And I can't tell if Ruby caught that. I don't think she has caught it. And she says, I know you don't really buy into the not talking behind people's backs thing, and that like being kind is your brand. Love it. But I'm not going to tell anyone. You can give me the goss. And Abby says, being kind isn't a brand. It's the right thing to do. And Roman says, and we do need to get on with our meeting, but good luck with your survey, in a clear dismissal. But it's just a weird bit because after she gets up and leaves, Abby says that girl's energy is so emotionally draining. And Aisha puts the gossip jar in front of her to pay. And she says, that's not gossip, it's a fact, and hands it back. I have to agree with Abby on the statement itself not being gossip. I felt like Aisha putting the jar in front of her was her kind of like trying to like stick it to Abby a little bit because she was irritated with her. Honestly. You know what I mean? And I wish that she would just like confront her about it. And the fact that clearly they had been going to say something. I don't know if like Abby was attempting to cut them off because in her opinion, it would be talking behind somebody's back. It would be gossip and it's not. But like, she clearly doesn't think that Ruby is the person to tell. And maybe it's because Ruby gives off a vibe of having ulterior motives and not being genuine. And whatever it was that they were going to tell Ruby was going to make them vulnerable in a way that like Ruby having the information felt unsafe. Whatever it is, though, Abby didn't give them the opportunity to make that choice for themselves. And she's making a call for the entire group, which is really shitty. So anyway, this, like, I there's so much in this episode, and there's like a whole thing with, Eric and a mysterious woman that he runs into. He's going to go to their house to watch, Jennifer's body and do pedicures, which sounds like a great time. And he has been asked by his mom to participate in this, oh my God, soup kitchen. I kept wanting to say potluck. But he says like, you know, I don't have time. We're doing this thing. I'm sorry. And his mom is clearly upset. And on the way there, this woman stops him. And there's a real vibe of like, she is part of this series of signs. Because he was like riding to school and there was a Bible standing up in the middle of the road, a white covered Bible just standing up. A bird poops on him twice, which is meant to be good luck. I think that's what you just say because it sucks so bad, but whatever. And then this woman is like, I need a meal. Can you show me where it is? And like manages to grab him by the arm and steer him in the direction and pulls him inside and tells him this is where you belong very firmly. And it feels like this was like a guide that came down to put him here. And his friends turn up because this is like part of, well, I don't know if it's friends. I feel like it's maybe just Abby that comes, but she used to do this with her own church. And so it's like kind of a nostalgic, nice thing for her. So she's here getting involved, and he finds out that they have no funding and that the whole soup kitchen is going to be shut down shortly. And this crew had been trying to figure out what cause they were going to fundraise for this year. So I'm really hoping that they're able to make it the soup kitchen, and this will be like his passion project, you know? And I love that for him. Like, I really like the investigation of a gay character who is Christian. I just think this is a really compelling story, and how you like come to terms with that sort of thing, you know? Excuse me. Okay, so I'm so sorry, guys. This, like, I'm out of time coming to Maeve's story, but there was so much going on. So it turns out Maeve and her brother got there too late. It's done really well where they're being called in and told, like, come into this room, and they think their mother's going to be in there. And the door is opened and she gets this expression, and it's all done in slow motion. And I couldn't figure it out until the camera turns and you just see a couch and like a box of tissues. And then I was like, oh God, she's dead already. Jesus Christ. 20 minutes earlier. And the reaction, it's so odd because like both she and her brother have the similar thing with like trying to be strong to the point of like acting as if nothing bothers them. But Maeve has come such a long way in letting herself be a little bit more vulnerable. And clearly Sean has not. So he keeps making jokes and just being like inappropriate in a way that I feel like if it were just him alone, maybe he could get away with this. But with his obviously genuinely upset sister standing next to him, it's just, dude, fucking read the room. And eventually it's time to see the body, and Maeve doesn't want to see her and is like, when I saw our uncle, I think she says, after he had died, I could never remember what he looked like alive, and I don't want to remember mom like that, so I don't want to go if that's okay. So he goes and identifies her, and he comes back out and he has a ride waiting for him. He goes to the window of Amy's car and tells Amy and Otis, and that's part of why I think they just are fine with waiting as long as she needs. And Maeve is very focused on the crossword puzzle that she's doing. It's a very fascinating thing because, like, coping with death and grief is such an individual thing. And we all cope in different ways. Now, I did cope with humor about my father's death. Not immediately after finding out. It was at his funeral, which I know a lot of people kind of do that, tell funny stories and whatnot. But the way that Sean is doing it is not in memory of his mother. It's to put a wall up between himself and his mother. And the way that Maeve is focusing on this crossword puzzle, it feels so real to me. It's just such an odd thing to get sort of fixated on. And she's buying herself some time to be alone in a way that doesn't really like make sense, but it gives her something to do while she's alone to give like the sort of plausible reason to still be sitting in the waiting area. And eventually, when she does come out, when she like actually finishes and gets in the car with the two of them, she lets them just like hold her. And I just really appreciated them having this moment together. You know, they end up going to stay at a, what do you call it? I think they're staying at a hotel together because that's closer to the hospital, because I think they're kind of far from the hospital. So we see this sort of montage at the end of the night. Ruby has texted Otis a billion times and he hasn't responded. I'm going to just say it. The fact that he hasn't responded at all, he has had nothing to do but chat with Amy and sit in the car. There's absolutely no reason for him not to text her back. Like, genuinely shitty to me. There's nothing that he is doing to support Maeve in that moment that warrants him ignoring Ruby like that. And yeah, they're all asleep and he's like on a cot in the room. And I really like them all just cuddled together. Like Amy is in the bed with Maeve and says, "Good night, pet. I love you." And Amy says, "I love you back." And it just makes me happy that she has this support. Going home to sleep by herself in her room after all of this would have been really tough. And I'm glad that she gets this like night with her friends for the first night, you know. She doesn't cry. I don't think we ever see her cry this episode. And it's a tough thing because her mother was barely in her life, and every time she came into her life, she fucked it up. So that's the thing about having a parent like that, is that when they die, you almost feel like things will be better for me now. And then you feel guilty about feeling that way. And it's just a fucking tumbled mess of emotions, you know? I know that Owen was kind of relieved because he was worried that it was going to be a whole other thing with her mom, and he did not enjoy that plot line. So for him, he was like, I'm just glad. But, you know, and I'm worried about her brother because he still remains to fuck her life up. And he clearly is doing something. Like, he seemed like he was either high or coming down or who knows. And he just feels like a bomb ready to go off. So, yeah, bummer episode, man. Really is. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you again so much for listening. Thank you, Ashleigh, for commissioning this. I am really looking forward to watching the next episode. I am also dreading it a little bit. I feel so bad for Maeve. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.